On a world map, the Pacific Ocean looks like a simple blue space, but it isn't. It is the largest continuous system on the planet. More than 165 million square kilometers of water are interconnected, larger than all the continents combined. From the coasts of the Americas to Asia and Oceania, it is a liquid band that encircles half the globe. If you could drain the Earth like a bathtub, the Pacific wouldn't be a big sea. It would be a complete landscape, with mountain ranges, plains, canyons, and abysses, a second planet hidden beneath the surface. That scale changes everything. The atmosphere we breathe depends largely on what happens here. The clouds we see every day, the rains that feed rivers and crops, the hurricanes and typhoons that batter coastlines, all are linked to this ocean. The Pacific Ocean moves more heat than any other region on the planet. It transports energy from the equator to the highest latitudes. It regulates global temperature like a gigantic natural air conditioning system. When this ocean changes, the entire planet's climate responds. To understand this better, we must look at its layers. Above is the surface zone, the layer thoroughly mixed by wind and waves. It is thin on a planetary scale. Sometimes it is only tens of meters deep. Sunlight reaches this layer. Photosynthesis occurs here. It is the living skin of the Pacific. Below, the open ocean plunges into the mesopelagic zone, where the light becomes dim. Further down, in the bathyal and abyssal zones, darkness is almost total. Pressure increases dramatically. The temperature stabilizes near freezing. And the ocean floor is not flat. There are mountains, valleys, fractures, and trenches that shatter any notion of uniformity. On the surface, currents create patterns invisible to the naked eye, but which control the distribution of heat and nutrients. In the northern hemisphere, a large band of water forms the North Pacific Gyre. In the south, another gigantic gyre rotates in the opposite direction. Along the equator, currents carry warm and cold water from one side of the ocean to the other. Off the coast of South America, the Humboldt Current draws cold, nutrient-rich water from the depths. This current feeds one of the most productive fishing systems in the world. Millions of people depend on it without even knowing its name. This entire system is not static. It breathes, and one of its best-known cycles has a name: El Niño and La Niña. In El Niño years, the surface waters of the central and eastern Pacific warm up. Winds shift, rainfall patterns change. Areas that are usually humid dry out. Others, normally dry, experience flooding. In La Niña years, the opposite occurs. The cold waters in the east intensify and the atmospheric pattern reverses. The important thing isn't just the technical detail. It's the idea that what happens in one part of the Pacific can alter harvests, economies, and lives thousands of miles away. The basis of that power lies in something very simple: water's ability to store heat. The Pacific accumulates energy for years. That energy doesn't disappear, it moves, it's released, it's exchanged with the atmosphere. When the ocean is warmer, storms can be more intense. When it cools, the paths of pressure systems change. That's why climatologists observe the Pacific so carefully. Its variations aren't a local detail. They're a sign of how the global climate machine is readjusting. But the Pacific doesn't just control the climate, it's also a factory of life. On the surface, phytoplankton uses sunlight and carbon dioxide to produce organic matter. Without that first link in the chain, there would be no fish, no seabirds, no marine mammals. In many regions, however, the surface water is nutrient poor. Life is concentrated where the ocean brings it up from the depths. In upwelling zones, like off the coasts of Peru or California, deep waters rich in nitrogen and phosphorus rise to the surface. There, the Pacific ceases to be a blue desert and becomes an invisible, fertile field. If we could see all this in real time, the Pacific wouldn't look like a uniform patch. We would see it as a moving mosaic. Whirlpools hundreds of kilometers across would form patterns that last for weeks. Tongues of warm water would extend from the tropics. Plumes of cold water would rise from the depths. The fronts, those lines where different water masses meet, are dynamic boundaries between distinct physical, chemical, and biological worlds. And all of this occurs against a backdrop that is also in motion, albeit on a much slower timescale. Beneath this wind-swept surface lies an extreme topography. In the middle of the Pacific, Mid-ocean ridges mark the separation of tectonic plates moving apart. New oceanic crust is born there. At the edges, at subduction zones, this crust plunges back into the Earth's interior. The result is a mosaic of underwater mountain ranges, volcanic plateaus, and deep trenches. Water not only rests on these foundations, but is also channeled. Currents follow valleys, flow around mountains, and accelerate in narrow passages. The solid landscape guides the liquid dynamics. All of this makes the Pacific much more than a stage for marine life. It is an integrated physical, chemical, and biological system. A climate engine, a carbon regulator, an immense habitat, and an archive of Earth's history. Its sediments hold records of ancient ice ages, temperature changes, and sea level fluctuations. Its currents mix waters that have spent decades traveling around the planet. Its surfaces reflect the signs of a changing climate. In tropical zones, that boundary teems with life. The coral reefs of the Pacific form some of the most diverse communities on the planet. In the so-called Coral Triangle, between Indonesia, the Philippines, and Papua New Guinea, thousands of species of fish, invertebrates, and algae coexist. The corals themselves are tiny animals that build structures of calcium carbonate. They look like rocks, but they are living colonies. By day, the light shines through the clear water and highlights their shapes. At night, many of these organisms change their behavior, feeding or sheltering in crevices invisible from the surface. Clownfish, angelfish, butterflyfish, and parrotfish hide among the coral branches. Clownfish find refuge among the tentacles of stinging anemones. Parrotfish bite the coral to feed on the microscopic algae that grow on it. In doing so, they crush the structure and expel sand. Grain by grain, they help form tropical beaches that we later walk on as tourists. What appears to be a static landscape is, in reality, the result of millions of small, daily interactions. Not everything happens on the reef. In the areas where rivers flow into the Pacific, mangroves form amphibious forests. Their roots are like columns supporting the soil. They withstand tides, crashing waves, and changes in salinity. Among these roots, young fish, crustaceans, and mollusks find refuge. They are natural nurseries. Many species that live offshore begin their lives here. If we destroy a mangrove, we don't just lose trees. We disrupt the first stage of life for hundreds of species. Beyond the mangroves, in shallow waters, underwater meadows of seagrass thrive. They look like simple plants, but they capture carbon, stabilize sediments, and feed turtles, herbivorous fish, and manatees in some regions. They function like the grasslands of the savanna, but submerged. Silently, they sustain food chains that extend into the deeper reaches of the Pacific. When we leave the coast behind, we enter the realm of the open ocean. Here, visual references disappear. There is no bottom in sight, no mountains or trees to mark distances, only water. Even so, it is one of the most dynamic environments in the biosphere. Large fish, like bluefin tuna, travel thousands of kilometers along its currents. Oceanic sharks patrol the surface waters in search of scattered schools of fish. Sea turtles cross the entire Pacific to feed in one region and nest in another. Humpback and blue whales follow migratory routes that have been repeated generation after generation. Above them, seabirds use the wind as their highway. Albatrosses, petrels, and shearwaters fly hundreds of kilometers without touching land. Their long, narrow wings are adapted to take advantage of air currents above the surface. They follow signs we cannot see, changes in temperature, smells, wave patterns. Many of these birds depend on areas where the ocean brings nutrients to the surface. There, plankton blooms, fish congregate, and the seemingly empty sea becomes a mobile buffet. At the heart of it all is plankton. Phytoplankton, tiny microscopic algae, captures energy from the sun and carbon dioxide dissolved in the water. It produces organic matter and releases oxygen. Some of that oxygen reaches the atmosphere. A significant fraction of the air you breathe right now was generated by organisms so small you'll never see them with the naked eye. Zooplankton, made up of small animals and larvae, feeds on phytoplankton. Then, small fish feed on zooplankton, and so on until you reach the large predators. This minuscule world has distinct rhythms. During the day, many organisms retreat to greater depths to avoid predators. At night, they rise to the surface to feed. It's the largest daily migration on the planet, measured in the number of individuals. It happens every day in almost every sea in the world, including the Pacific. But we don't see it from the shore. We only perceive the indirect results: fish appearing and disappearing, birds congregating in certain spots, marine mammals hunting where life is concentrated. Sometimes this invisible world reveals itself with light. In many regions of the Pacific, the water seems to glow when something stirs it. It's the bioluminescence of plankton and other organisms. An oar, a ship's wake, or even the movement of a swimmer can trigger a chemical reaction that emits bluish flashes. For a few seconds, the sea resembles an inverted starry sky. Each point of light is a defense response, a signal, or simply the byproduct of a biochemical reaction favored by evolution. Once again, what appeared to be a simple volume of water turns out to be a network of signals and responses. This open ocean also bears the human footprint. Fishing fleets roam the Pacific in search of tuna, swordfish, and other commercially valuable species. Often the nets fail to distinguish between the target species and what is inadvertently caught. Turtles, sharks, and birds are trapped as bycatch. Furthermore, surface currents have accumulated enormous concentrations of plastic debris in some ocean gyres. Fragments of plastic, microplastics, and abandoned nets can be found thousands of kilometers from any coastline. The Pacific Ocean doesn't just distribute nutrients and heat, it also distributes our waste. And yet, despite all this, for most people, the Pacific remains a static image, a blue plane seen from the shore or from an airplane window. We almost never think about what happens a few hundred meters below the surface, or how life changes when the light begins to fade. The sunlit layer in which almost everything we've just described takes place is merely a film over a much larger volume. As we descend, the light gives up first. The color red disappears after just a few meters. Orange and yellow follow a little later. At about 200 meters, there is almost no light left that is useful for photosynthesis. We enter the mesopelagic zone, the twilight ocean. It is not absolute night, but day has not yet arrived. The temperature drops. The pressure increases by 1 atmosphere for every 10 meters. The landscape becomes a column of cold water, seemingly empty, but it is not. Here live fish with elongated bodies and large eyes, adapted to squeeze out every last photon. Many have exaggerated jaws, full of needle-like teeth. It is a strategy to not let anything that passes nearby escape. Others are small and transparent, almost invisible in the twilight. Jellyfish, siphonophores, and other gelatinous creatures form floating chains and curtains that filter the plankton that still dares to rise. This intermediate world acts as a corridor between the energy-rich surface and the colder depths. Every day, as evening falls, a silent movement takes place. Millions of organisms that have spent the daylight hours in deeper waters begin to rise. It is the daily vertical migration. Zooplankton ascend to feed on the phytoplankton at the surface. Behind them come fish, squid, and predators that take advantage of this feast. At dawn, the procession reverses. They descend again to hide from the hunters that use sunlight to see. This continuous ascent and descent transports carbon from the surface to the ocean depths. It is part of the biological pump that helps regulate the climate. As we descend further, sunlight disappears completely. We enter the bathyal zone and, deeper still, the abyssal zone. Here, darkness is absolute. The temperature stabilizes just above freezing. The pressure can be hundreds of times greater than at the surface. There are no plants. There is no photosynthesis. Energy arrives in the form of rain, remains of dead organisms, excrement, organic particles that fall slowly from above. This is what many biologists call marine snow. Life organizes itself around this scarce and irregular rain. Abyssal fish with soft bodies and light bones wait motionless to conserve energy. Many have disproportionately large mouths, capable of swallowing prey almost as big as themselves. If you come across food in a place where almost nothing ever happens, you can't afford to waste it. Crustaceans and starfish move across the sedimented seabed, sifting through organic particles. Strangely shaped sea cucumbers filter the mud in search of usable molecules. In the midst of this darkness, light reappears, but it doesn't come from the sun. Many organisms have developed the ability to produce their own light, bioluminescence. Lanternfish have rows of glowing spots along their flanks, which they can turn on and off. Viperfish display glowing organs near their mouths. Some squid expel clouds of light instead of dark ink. In jellyfish and siphonophores, electrical flashes run along their bodies like living billboards. This light serves to attract prey, confuse predators, communicate, or camouflage themselves against the minimal glare from above. In many cases, bioluminescence functions as a deception. A fish might light up a lure near its mouth to attract curious prey. When they get close enough, it swallows them in a swift motion. Others use light patterns on their bellies that mimic the faint light still filtering in from the surface. From below, their silhouette becomes almost invisible. In a world without shadows, light is a precision tool. Not all the energy that powers these depths comes from above. In some parts of the Pacific, the seafloor tears open, releasing hot, mineral-laden fluids. These are hydrothermal vents. Seawater seeps into the crust, is heated by nearby magma, becomes enriched with chemical compounds like hydrogen sulfide and metals, and emerges at temperatures that can exceed 350 degrees Celsius. Upon contact with the surrounding cold water, these minerals precipitate and form chimneys that can reach tens of meters in height. A distinct type of ecosystem arises around these chimneys. Instead of relying on light, it relies on chemistry. Chemosynthetic bacteria use the energy from chemical reactions, such as sulfide oxidation, to produce organic matter. They are the dark equivalent of surface phytoplankton. Entire food chains are built upon them. Giant tube worms without mouths or intestines depend on symbiotic bacteria living inside them. Blind crabs, mussels, and specialized shrimp form dense communities around vents. These thermal oases are distributed along the Pacific's mid-ocean ridges and volcanic arcs. They are biodiversity hotspots amidst vast, resource-poor abyssal plains. Each vent field has its own unique species, and yet some organisms manage to disperse between systems separated by hundreds or thousands of kilometers. Their larvae travel with the deep currents, finding new vents when the old ones shut down. It's a reminder that even in the deep ocean, life is not static. It moves, colonizes, and adapts. From the perspective of the search for life in the universe, these communities are revealing. They demonstrate that sunlight is not an absolute requirement for the existence of complex ecosystems. A stable energy source, liquid water, and rich chemistry are sufficient. When we think of oceans hidden beneath the ice of moons like Europa or Enceladus, we imagine scenarios very similar to these vents. Places where a world's hot interior and its ocean connect, creating potential niches for life. But the image of the deep Pacific isn't limited to vents. Most of the ocean floor is made up of abyssal plains, vast expanses of fine sediment that accumulate over millions of years. Scattered across this carpet are the remains of microscopic shells, minerals, rock fragments, and increasingly human waste. Plastics, synthetic fibers, and heavy metals have already reached these depths. Microplastics have been found in the guts of organisms living thousands of meters below the surface. The most isolated corner of the planet is no longer entirely safe from our activity. On bathymetric maps of the Pacific, ocean trenches are deep scars. They mark the boundaries where one tectonic plate plunges beneath another. The ocean is not just a layer of water over rock. It is water filling a system of moving edges, fractures, and folds. In the western Pacific, those edges become extreme. There you'll find some of the deepest trenches on Earth. The most famous is the Mariana Trench. It stretches in an arc east of the Philippines and south of Japan. It is about 2,500 kilometers long. Its deepest known point, He Challenger Deep, is more than 10,900 meters deep, according to the most recent measurements. That means if you placed Mount Everest inside it, there would still be more than a kilometer of water above the summit. The pressure there is more than 1,000 times the atmospheric pressure at the surface. That's not just a number. It's a physical condition that crushes any structure not designed to withstand it. Further south, the Tonga and Kermadec trenches form another chain of chasms. They are not as well known outside the scientific community, but they are almost as deep as the Mariana Trench. The Tonga Trench exceeds 10,800 meters in some places. The Kermadec Trench, somewhat further south, reaches over 10,000 meters. Together, these trenches mark the zone where the Pacific Plate subducts beneath the smaller Tonga and Kermadec plates, and, further south, beneath the Indo-Australian Plate. It is a serial subduction system. A reminder that the Pacific is not just an ocean, it is a crustal factory that is constantly being created and destroyed. In these places, the seafloor relief is anything but flat. There are near vertical walls, terraces, massive landslides, volcanic cones, and deep fractures. Sediments accumulate in some areas and slide in others. Earthquakes are frequent. Many originate at the plate boundaries. Some generate tsunamis that sweep across the entire Pacific. Each earthquake is a sign of the energy accumulated at the boundary between the ocean and the Earth's interior. Exploring these abysses is an extreme technical challenge. In the mid-20th century, the bathyscaphe Trieste was the first to descend to the Challenger Deep with a human crew. Its observation sphere had steel walls more than 10 centimeters thick. The outer structure creaked under the pressure during the descent. Nevertheless, it reached the bottom and proved that it was possible to reach that world. Since then, only a few manned missions and several unmanned vehicles have returned to those depths. Each descent requires sophisticated engineering, advanced materials, and minimal tolerance for error. Despite these difficulties, life is present. Fish adapted to extreme pressures have been observed on the walls and bottom of the trenches, such as certain snailfish that disappear at shallower depths. They have soft bodies without air-filled cavities and proteins modified to function under pressure conditions that would deform normal molecules. Alongside them live crustaceans, amphipods, and other invertebrates that feed on organic matter that drifts down from above or breaks off from the walls. Microbes capable of living buried tens of meters below the seabed have been found in the bottom sediments. They consume chemical compounds present in pore water and trapped organic material. Their metabolism is slow. Their life cycles can extend much longer than those of surface organisms. For them, the trench is a stable environment on human timescales, although dynamic on geological timescales. Each layer of sediment records changes in climate, biological productivity, and volcanic and tectonic activity. These trenches are also key points for understanding the deep carbon cycle. Some of the organic matter produced on the surface sinks, accumulates on the ocean floor, and over time can be drawn into the Earth's interior by subduction. In some cases, this carbon returns to the surface through volcanoes and gas emissions. The Pacific Ocean doesn't just store carbon in its water, it exports it to the Earth's mantle and reintroduces it into the atmosphere over millions of years. It's a slow cycle, but fundamental to the planet's climate history. Near these trenches, submarine volcanism is intense. Volcanic island arcs form, such as the Marianas, Tonga, and part of the Kermadec Islands. These are the above-ground portion of a process that occurs deep underground. The water and sediments that sink with the Pacific Plate release compounds as they heat up. These compounds promote magma formation. This magma rises and feeds volcanoes that build islands. Thus, the mountains we see above the sea surface are connected to processes occurring hundreds of kilometers below the ocean floor. Cold vents also exist on the ridges and flanks of trenches, where water rich in methane and other compounds seeps out. Although not as spectacular as the hydrothermal vents of the mid-ocean ridges, they support communities of organisms that live by chemosynthesis. Bacteria that use methane as an energy source form the first rung of the food chain. Above them, communities of clams, mussels, and other invertebrates thrive. Every time scientists investigate a new depression or rift, they discover variations of these systems. Human presence at these depths is minimal, but its footprint is already detectable. Remains of plastics, metals, and other debris have been found even in the deepest parts of the Mariana Trench. Some amphipods in the trenches contain chemicals derived from industrial pollutants. The Pacific, however vast, is not infinite. What we throw into the sea sooner or later finds its way to regions we thought were untouched. Even so, our ignorance remains enormous. The mapping of many Pacific trenches is based on relatively coarse, low-resolution sonar data. Only a few areas have been mapped in detail. There are likely important geological structures, unique biological communities, and deep water circulation patterns that we have yet to see. Each new campaign with high-resolution sonar or autonomous vehicles adds details that change our understanding of the topography and dynamics of these abysses. From a planetary perspective, these trenches are a natural laboratory. They allow us to study how living matter responds to extreme conditions of pressure and darkness. They help calibrate models of how life might be organized in environments very different from Earth's surface. At the same time, they show us the most active side of the solid planet, the place where the crust is recycled, where earthquakes occur, and where oceans open and close throughout geological eras. Today, for the first time, we have the technology to attempt to survey the vast ocean depths. And yet, what we know remains small compared to all that remains to be discovered. Part of the work begins in space. Satellites don't see the ocean floor, but they record the height of the sea surface with millimeter precision. Tiny variations in that height reveal seamounts, trenches, and mid-ocean ridges that alter the gravitational field. From this data, scientists infer the topography of large areas of the Pacific that have never been directly measured. Other satellites observe surface temperature, approximate chlorophyll concentration, cloud movement, and storms. It's a constant panoramic view of the ocean's face. To go beyond the surface, buoys and floats are used. The Argo network, for example, consists of thousands of freely floating instruments. They descend to depths of about 2,000 meters, measure temperature and salinity, and then return to the surface to transmit their data via satellite. Each cycle lasts for days. Over time, this network has built a three-dimensional image of how the Pacific stores and moves heat. Thanks to these floats, we know that the ocean has absorbed most of the excess energy generated by global warming. Near the coasts and in strategic areas, anchored buoys record waves, winds, currents, and in some cases, tsunami signals. When an underwater earthquake displaces large volumes of water, that disturbance travels across the ocean. The buoys detect the change and send alerts that can save lives in distant coastal areas. The Pacific, which for centuries was a source of surprises, is beginning to be monitored in real time. To map the seabed in detail, ships equipped with multi-beam sonar are used. They emit sound pulses that bounce off the seabed. By measuring the return time, they construct high-resolution maps. Each campaign covers a relatively narrow strip, but over time the gaps are filled in. Even so, most of the Pacific seabed has not been mapped in this way. It is so vast that even working continuously, it would take decades to complete the job with a single ship. That's where remotely operated vehicles and autonomous robots come in. ROVs, connected to the ship by a cable, carry cameras, lights, and manipulator arms. They can approach hydrothermal vents, collect samples of rocks, sediments, and organisms, and record high-quality video. UVs, on the other hand, are robots that are programmed, deployed at sea, and operate wirelessly for hours or days, following predetermined trajectories. They can fly just a few meters above the seabed, taking images and data in areas where a ship could not safely maneuver. In some cases, underwater gliders or gliders are used. They don't have propellers. They change their buoyancy to rise and fall and use their wings to transform that ascent and descent into horizontal forward motion. They use very little energy, which allows them to collect data for months. They move slowly, but precisely for that reason, they capture slow and continuous changes in the ocean's structure. All these instruments, combined, begin to show a constantly moving Pacific, with layers of water that mix, swirl, and sink. This information is not just a scientific curiosity. The Pacific is one of the planet's main heat and carbon sinks. By absorbing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, it helps moderate the rate of warming. But that same process acidifies the water. The ocean's pH has measurably decreased since the Industrial Revolution. This affects organisms that build shells and skeletons of calcium carbonate, such as corals, mollusks, and some types of plankton. If their ability to build these structures is reduced, food chains change from the ground up. Warming also alters currents, the stratification of layers, and the frequency of events like El Niño. Some regions of the Pacific are becoming warmer and oxygen-poor. Areas that were once productive are stagnating. Others are becoming more unstable, with marine heat waves affecting corals, fish, and algae. Science is trying to model these changes to anticipate their effects on fisheries, climate, and coastal ecosystems, but the complexity of the system means there will always be margins of uncertainty. Added to all this are direct impacts. Overfishing has reduced populations of large pelagic fish in many areas of the Pacific. Some oceanic shark species have lost most of their abundance in just a few decades. Bottom trawling damages deep-sea habitats that take centuries to recover if they ever do. Polymetallic nodule mining on the Pacific floor, still in the experimental phase, poses the risk of destroying abyssal ecosystems before they have even been described. Plastic pollution is another front. Fragments and fibers have been detected from the surface to the bottom of trenches. Marine animals mistake plastics for food. Microplastics enter food chains and can carry chemicals attached to their surface. The Pacific, due to its size and the structure of its currents, acts as a huge trap where this waste accumulates. At the same time, the currents redistribute it toward coasts and remote areas. Faced with this scenario, exploration ceases to be merely an act of curiosity. It becomes a defense tool. You can't protect what you don't know. Mapping the seabed, understanding currents, and identifying areas of high biodiversity and productivity are key to designing effective marine-protected areas. Similarly, monitoring temperature, acidity, and oxygen helps detect worrying changes in time.